This is LXBN TV, and I'm Colin O'Keefe. Last week, the FTC released the final version of its long-awaited privacy report, formerly titled Protecting Consumer Privacy in an Era of Rapid Change, a proposed framework for business and policymakers. To explain the basics of the report, we bring in Kevin Khurana, attorney with Proskauer and author on their privacy law blog. Kevin, first off, it's my understanding that the report has three major principles that it goes over. What can you tell me about these?
Sure, yeah. Those three major principles are privacy by design. They also want companies to simplify choices for consumers, and they also want companies to increase their transparency with respect to consumers. So with respect to privacy by design, they want companies to incorporate, privacy protections into every aspect of their data practices. They want to make sure that protections are present in their data security, in their retention, their data disposal. And they also want to make sure that these practices and protections are present throughout the life cycle of these companies' products and services. Now, with respect to simplifying choices for consumers, they want to make sure that when a consumer is actually presented with a choice, they need to be presented with a choice. So, for example, if a company has a relationship with a consumer and the context of the transaction doesn't require a choice with respect to collection and use of customer data, then they shouldn't really be presented with that choice, or if they're not required by law. Now, when should they be presented with choices? When companies are going to be using data in a materially different manner than what was claimed when the data was collected, or when they're possibly collecting data for other sensitive data for other purposes. Now, with respect to greater transparency, they want privacy policies that we see on all these company websites to be easier and standardized. You read a lot of these privacy policies and you can't understand what they're saying. Yeah. So I think that's one of their major goals. They also want companies to provide access to the consumer data that they maintain to consumers. And they also stated that the access that should be granted should be proportionate to the sensitivity of the data, which is also important. Yeah. And they also focus on educating consumers with respect to their data privacy practices. I see. So those are the three major principles. It seems like they're taking the FTC is taking an approach that promotes proactivity as opposed to reacting to data incidents. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, we see nowadays there's so many data breaches happening that, I think the report said that there were less last year, but they were more costly. But still, it's at a point where we want to be more proactive versus reacting to these type of things.
Yeah, definitely.
And second, do not track is obviously a huge subject as of late. For those that don't know, what is do not track, and then what does this report do to address the FTC's efforts in this regard?
Sure. Well, do not track is a mechanism that will allows consumers to control the collection and use of their online browsing data. Everyone is affected by this because everyone who uses the web has certain information collected. So basically, what this report did was it basically summarized what has been happening with Do Not Track. For example, it acknowledged that right now there are bills in both the House and the Senate to address the creation of Do Not Track mechanism, and they've also the report also talked about how there have been businesses that have taken it upon themselves to implement or attempt to implement Do Not Track mechanisms. For example, Microsoft, Apple, Mozilla, they've all implemented Do Not Track mechanisms in their browsers. The effectiveness of those Do Not Track mechanisms is debatable, though. And the FTC also acknowledged that industry-wide there has been a certain push to implement Do Not Track. Specifically, they acknowledged that the Digital Advertising Alliance has put forth some efforts, and also the World Wide Web Consortium has put forth efforts. And while the FTC acknowledged these efforts, they also said that a lot more needs to be done. Specifically, they said that they're committed to work with industry and business to complete an implementation, and I'm going to quote this, an easy-to-use, persistent, and effective do-not-track system. Mm-hmm. So, while some progress has been made, the FTC still wants to keep pushing forward with this, and you are correct. It's definitely a very hot topic, and it is a subject of debate right now.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch to see where this goes. I've gotten into arguments with friends just to see if this is going to end up window draping type legislation that eventually comes, or if it'll be effective. It'll be interesting to watch to see how that plays out. And then finally, this report, sets forth the desire for legislation on the subject it covers. But how is the report, used right now?
Sure. Well, I think the purpose of the report was to serve as a best practices guide for companies who use and collect data. Another purpose of the report was to provide guidelines to Congress and say, hey, here are the major issues, and here's what we think companies should be doing. Mm-hmm. But with regard to the actual effectiveness of the report, I mean, the FTC can't go and enforce a company for not complying with the best practices set forth in the report, mm-hmm. if it doesn't already have the right to under existing law.
Yeah.
What's interesting, though, is that the FTC did say that in the report that it was going to work with the Department of Commerce to create enforceable self-regulatory codes of conduct. Mm-hmm. So companies who adopt these codes of conduct will be held to comply with these codes of conduct, and if they don't, then the FTC could take enforcement action against them. But these, of course, are still in the works.
I see. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to watch. We saw the White House release its privacy report. The FTC has its out. It's going to be very. I mean, it's as hot a topic as there is right now in the law. So it's going to be very interesting to watch going forward. Once again, that was Kevin Khurana of Proskauer and the Privacy Law Blog. For more on this story, be sure to visit privacylaw.proskauer.com and, of course, lxbn.lexblog.com, where we have a ton of posts specifically on the FTC privacy report. So be sure to go there, search for it, and you'll be sure to find a ton of stuff. Thanks again for your time on this, Kevin.
All right. Thank you, Colin.